a bunch of free trade agreements. They're called comprehensive economic trade partnerships. And the first one we signed was with India. So the UAE, a country of 10 million people, we go to India, a country of 1.4 billion people, at least, depending on which, maybe it's 1.4, a bit more now. I went and I asked the minister then, I said, this is fantastic. You've signed in 6 months, record time globally, a free trade agreement with the UAE. Surely you're not after our market, right? We're like 10 million out of 1.4 billion. So what are you after? Why did you invest in the UAE? Why did you start this free trade agreement with the UAE? And he goes, we want to go to Africa. You are our access to Africa. 1/3 of the international flights that go out of India come to Dubai every single day. And they want to access Africa, but they can't access Africa directly for many, many reasons. And again, Africa is not what I keep reminding people, I know I shouldn't. But I say to stop saying China, India, and Africa. China and India are countries, Africa is a continent. So you can't deal with them as a unit. But India is so interested now to push its investments, its entrepreneurs, very slowly into Africa. And luckily for us, UAE is the conduit for them because of the connectivity. Because they can meet African entrepreneurs in Dubai, because they can fly to Africa via Emirates. My friend Bunmi, he always tells me he loves to fly our airlines even between African countries because it's so that's the connectivity we're talking about. But that's a very small microcosm because the Dubai isn't going to unlock a lot of that. From your vantage point, so Africa, I don't need to keep, when people fall in love with Africa, then they don't fall in love out of love, then, economists puts Africanizing and then they stop talking about it and then comes back again. In 2050, it's going to be more people in Africa than in India and China combined. So clearly the future is there. But within intra-African integration is still a challenge, let alone connecting with the world.
No, that is very true. I've been sitting, listening, and wondering where I will start off from. I think I made it onto this panel when in Brazil, I raised that Brazil, South Africa, India, China, Russia, we are part of the BRICS, right? And I'm in energy, I'm in infrastructure, and I wonder...
BRICS Plus.
BRICS Plus, yes.
We're in this with you.
I'm getting to that. Yes,
of course.
I was like, I'm in infrastructure, I'm in energy, and I was like, I see the partners and competitors that we work with, all or most of them are coming from Europe. You've got the Chinese as the original equipment manufacturers, and yet when we design procurement program for infrastructure, we actually go to other growth markets to actually learn how do they structure it, right? Because it is only then we realize we've got a lot more in common than actually with the regions who are our biggest trade partners. From South Africa, it is Europe and the US are trade partners. And it's actually through this program at MIT, I learned about North Africa wanting to integrate with us more. We had big debates about that, but I loved hearing that, right? And then it got to, it's BRICS Plus. And for me, it's like the opportunity, we have all the right fundamentals. We collectively have the youngest and growing population. These are the only regions where, as an entrepreneur, you can only build, where there is opportunity for growth, there is opportunity to create anything new. And I wondered, why don't we integrate a lot more? And I come from a country where most of the people in South Africa, when they look at other African countries, it's the rest of Africa. That's part of the problem with most of my countrymen. We don't see each other as part of Africa. And that's why something like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, it is so important. We were the last to get independence, but there is so much to learn from how Latin America and especially Asia integrated. And for us as Africans, that's where we need to start off at. And it's actually programs like the Foundry Fellowship, building ecosystems there that are so important. But then I look at the rest of the areas or regions that really excite us. And now I am happy and proud to say, Dr. Abla, since our trip in Egypt, we've seen the Middle East countries have an interest a lot more in South Africa and Africa from a trading perspective. We are partners with Aqua Power, now with Infinity Power, with El Sewedi that's coming to South Africa, and as a function of integrating a lot more. And I think we should be having a lot more of these conversations. I mean, I asked the Brazilians to say, guys, you deregularized your energy sector and your transmission sector before essentially Africa. And so why are you not developing projects in Africa, in South Africa? Because that is exactly where we are, and we'll have a mix of distributed and centralized energy. And there is just so much to build. There is capital in the Middle East. So how do we have the right conversations? We've got a demographic dividend. We've got a lot of minerals that we can explore. So how do we talk about that a lot more strategically? Something that China has been showing us for a few decades. So how do we leverage on that? How do we look at India as the next global leader to actually position ourselves to actually take advantage of that beyond 1 or 2 presidential terms? I don't know who's a bigger romantic, politicians or entrepreneurs, but we believe that anything is possible, and for us, challenges we always look at as an opportunity to solve something. So yeah, I'll stop
Thank
there.
you very much for that positive note. I think politicians and entrepreneurs, they both are irrational, and you have to be, because otherwise you wouldn't get into these professions. If you know, they always told me in the Middle East, if you're not worried, you're not informed. Because if you see the numbers, you have to be worried. It doesn't work. But I think, look, I think we have a great conversation starting here. If you want to jump in, again, we're going to go back to this whole idea. I'm going to throw 3 scenarios at you, because I think the world has broken now, and it has to be remended. Trust, connections, and it's not only because of the last few months. I think in the last, look, I was in the World Trade Organization 2 years ago, negotiating some things, and people told me this is finished. The World Trade Organization. There's no judges, so you can put all the rules you want, but if there's no recourse to the rules and nobody gets penalized, what's the point of having them? So the world is changing, and here's how it could settle. It could settle into, I'm going to throw them and let you all tell me, and if any of these make sense, or what are the impediments to all of these happening. It could settle into extreme regionalization. So Europe will band together, and they will have some people who will sort of Europeize themselves, jump on board. Now, the first time in many, many years, I started hearing the terms Eurasia coming back. Despite everything happening, now they're talking about Eurasia, Central Asia. So everybody's looking at their new and better friends now. Africa will huddle together more and more, despite your Brexit, the sort of predictions for South Africa, but because of need, not because we like each other, or the absolute need. The best thing that could happen to people is to have joint fears. And then ASEAN, and then you see China also, and that's one option. The other option is what I call middle powers. And this is not my favorite scenario, but we've seen it. We've looked at this scenario. Your Indonesias, your Egypts, your UAEs, so my upper middle class kind of countries in terms of GDP per capita start dealing much more together. And you get a proper second world. You've had the first world that used to be called the third world, remember that horrible term? But we've never had a proper second world. But these are the middle powers now. And you can see the UK trying to carve its ambitions through being one of the leaders of the middle powers, joined by an Australia, joined by an Indonesia. And then this will mean we have 3-tier world. Because everybody needs to survive moving forward. We still have to deal and invest. But we're not going to go invest lower or upper. We start playing at this level. And the third option is we re-globalize under different rules. And we break up. I think we heard from the administration here is either you choose us or China. And either you choose us or China isn't a romantic or political discussion. We were told to choose Huawei or AT&T. This is all about buying equipment. This is about do you take Starlink, or do you drive BYD, or do you drive Ford? This is a very hardcore infrastructure money flow discussion. This is not about which ideology to believe in, or do you do elections or one party rule. So if we all see the value of integration? We said we're going to set the second round about blocks. We know that there's a lot of money in the UAE. There's a huge market for you guys in Africa. You know that by working closer with Europe and other parts, you make money. You know that greater integration with Sao Paulo. If this is positive, net positive, what's stopping it? Politicians, people don't get it. External forces trying to drive us away from each other. What's stopping this obviously net positive scenario for all of us working more, investing more? Why isn't our money being invested in Brazilian entrepreneurs or fintechs in Jakarta? Or simply because we have been taught not to talk to each other? What's the blocks? What are the blockages here? Second round of the same question. Same question to all of you. If you think you have, we really want to come up with one or two concrete ideas, we start carrying the flag of moving forward. Because the world has changed and it's up to us to
That's the question.
figure it out.
That's the key question.
Same sequence. I follow same sequence. Dr. Abdullah, why not? So I'm a simple guy like that. I don't like to add more decisions to myself.
Okay. Before answering the question directly, I just want to step back
Please,
one
please.
second. You mentioned that there's the hardware part of the connectivity and the software. You're saying it's either this or that. Actually, both are needed. Okay, big time. You cannot talk about one without the other.
So we have to start one. Which one do we start? And we had this conversation.
Okay, all right. No, actually, they can both happen in parallel. You cannot say one before the other. But what is for sure is that both are needed. Number two, and this is important and relevant, we should separate, because this is where the barriers are coming from really. We should separate the politics from the economic efficiency. This is extremely important, because the political mess that's in the world right now is pushing us in directions which are not economically efficient. Okay? For example, again, I'll go back to this IMEC thing. Huge investment. If the political problem in the Middle East is solved, really solved, in a fair way, okay, and the Suez Canal is freely moving, it's the cheapest. Businesses are going to go there directly. If you throw lots of investments, okay, they will not be needed, and it will be a deadweight loss from an economic terminology. Like, it's investments that nobody benefits from. So it's important to separate those two. I thought I have to say these two. The access to Africa, and it's coming through Dubai. Okay, Dubai is the airline. Egypt is part of Africa and is part of the continent free trade agreement. So this is actually a much closer one, and it's on those grounds that India and Egypt and France are talking about adding Egypt to the IMEC. Going now to your direct question, is it regionalization or the middle income countries or the reglobalization? Reglobalization is definitely out, because the way we are looking at it is with the existing powers, the existing system, so it's not reglobalization. Okay? It's just playing, the game with chairs, changing the seats, but going back to the same thing. This is not working. What is needed, I think the practical one, is the regionalization. Okay? And I think it's essential, because at this point the world is going through a lot of protectionism. The system is completely messy. The multilateral system is failing big time, thanks to the US. Okay? Big time. Whether we're talking trade, whatever. Okay? It is failing. All right? So at least regionally, we need to be connected. This is the practical move, that you regionally get connected first, and then we go for the continents. Now, getting connected involves infrastructure, physical infrastructure. In Africa, we need roads. It is cheaper to go from Europe to Africa than to move from one country in Africa to the other. The roads are not ready. This has to be corrected. This was planted by the colonial powers, and it has to end. Okay? So we need infrastructure. We need visa. No, we don't need visas to move around Africa. It's very simple and very straightforward. Facilitate the movement of people, unify the ecosystem as much as possible so that entrepreneurs can work. And when I mean entrepreneurs, I mean taking it bottom up then. All right? This is putting pressure from the young people with the innovation for the unity. So regionalization, whether we're talking about Latin America or we're talking about Africa, is a must. Then following that, we can have more connectivity. Last but not least, when we talk infrastructure, it doesn't necessarily mean roads and bridges. Okay? And why am I saying this? Because, for example, with this, again, the IMEC, because it's the most practical and I've been working on it, so I know, the suggested route via Egypt goes from Europe to Alexandria okay, on railways through Egypt, then crossing the Red Sea with what's called train ferries. So the train continues with the boat to Saudi Arabia on railways there, UAE railways, okay, all the way to India. So it's one way. So and the road is actually ready because we do have the infrastructure. Egypt has been suffering from that in the last few years. The reason was the infrastructure. So we have it. We spent money on it. It is physically there. So it doesn't have to be huge investments. And this means also that the connectivity with Latin America, it will never be a train ferry, of course, all right? But there are ways around it. So trade agreements, making data and information available to the young people so that they can connect together. I think connecting the young generation in all 3 continents or 4 continents is the starting point. So it has to be bottom up, okay, and then from top down with political, with governmental connections that see the fate of the entire world connected. I mean, COVID took place. When it started, people knew that they are fully connected, they're all going to die if this continues. After a while, when they got better, they forgot this, and we're back to the starting point again. So this helps.
So, apart from having another pandemic to unite us, we'll figure out a few ideas. I think the 2 things I heard from you that are absolutely spot on. One is that the physical connection, and I'm just thinking about this IMAC physical connection. This is going to be rocket fuel for entrepreneurs. If 10 of it even happens, if they can access markets like that. And the other thing is people to people. By the way, we have a program, if anybody's interested, we can chat afterwards, where we're trying to pair entrepreneurs who are working on the same. So if there's a fintech company working on insurance tech in Dubai and somebody else in Nigeria doing it, we're thinking the best way now for them to access markets is to do a JV and start accessing each other, because somebody in Dubai is not going to be able to sell in Nigeria that easily for a million years. But if we start getting them to meet through these platforms, so I like your idea of bottom up, because they are causing pressure on the system. They're pulling the system. But Dr. Abdullah said we have to mentally separate politics from business, which I was looking at you and politics. Yes, exactly. No, is it even humanly possible? Can politicians sort of literally think this is good for the people economically, so let me put all my ideas aside? Because that's one way to move. I mean, the numbers are behind them completely. If we do that, the world under conditions of no politics is a beautiful world, where everybody's rich and wealthy.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it, and I was triggered by your idea of separating. But yesterday night, Ndidi was saying that the purpose of her life was to build a new narrative for Africa, and I think here's the answer also. How do we build a new narrative? Because the answer infrastructure, it's a chicken and egg question, right? If we need infrastructure in order to do it differently, but then we don't have money to invest in infrastructure, so then we're stuck where we are. So I think we need to create a new narrative of how do we connect without the infrastructure that we believe is needed? How do we do it with the things that we already do, we already have? So we have like a green corridor between Brazil, Congo, and Indonesia. And the world's gonna need us, right? The world's gonna need our green corridor. How do we use it to help us build different infrastructure, to help us use the creativity and resilience that our people have already? Because we do a lot of things with kind of nothing, right? We are still surviving, and we are finding things, and we are innovating, and we are creating different ways of life without the money and resources that we normally think it's necessary. So for me, creating a new narrative, understanding that we already have a lot, and using that to attract money. And I don't think that's easy, and I don't have a way to do it, but I think that's the way we need to start thinking about it. And the other thing, and Dr. Abba said about the legal framework, right? How do we work in agreements that find a different way to work together with the scenario that we already have? And I think this year with the Trump administration, it's forcing us to do that in a faster way that we were doing it. I mean, we were going, so we need to go faster because otherwise, I don't know. Otherwise, I don't know what's gonna happen, and I don't want to think about it. But I would say, like, that's my contribution. My 2
Fantastic.
cents.
No, I think the shock therapy everybody's getting now is fantastic, and I think it's long-term positive, medium-term sort of we'll see how it goes. Short-term would be painful, but you said some fantastic stuff here, and I'll jump back to you. The same question I'm going to ask about Asia from Indonesia. You said that we have to change the narrative. So the best part about the conversation today is the narrative now. There's no narrative now. Globally, you literally can't find a narrative that makes sense to two people. Who's the leader? What morals do we adhere to? What does make sense? So this is a great time to shape a new narrative. I'm very optimistic. I'll tell you my own personal view. I'll use my card as being optimistic with the next generation, who have this global connectivity. I'm very aware that in this room, the average age is probably 28. I'm pushing it to more than that. But the next generation, but the next generation, we have kids in our part of the world who are learning Korean and Japanese because they watch stuff on social media. They love manga. And I think that connectivity was never possible before. We always used to get Hollywood. We all liked Rambo. But there were never no heroes apart from Rambo and Mai. Now their heroes are One Piece and some guy from Korea. And so that narrative might be shaping, but it's not going to happen organically. Again, what's stopping us? We all want, if it's a business to business discussion, CEO to CEO, we could make money easily together. But then we think, oh, you're in Indonesia, it's so far. I think it's not so far. But it is somehow.
Well, it is actually far. I mean, like, imagine.
I say Brazil is far, but I say it's not further than California.
I know. So let me put it together. I mean, like, I'm a very optimistic person, but yet is quite pessimistic if anything organically will happen between, let's say, Brazil and Vietnam, for example. Of course, there's a lot of commonalities, but to put together something that's very far, and we're not quite familiar to each other. I think that's a lot of push, I guess. You're mocking about Hollywood, but it plays a role. I mean, like, we're somewhat familiar with America. As much as, many people from Asia, Southeast Asia, maybe never, visited America, but they feel like they're close to America. They feel like they know the people of America. While at the same time, as much I followed football, Argentina as well, just to please, definitely. But that's about it. We don't know about Latin America people. There's a lot of barriers actually blocking us. So I was talking in the beginning about similarities, right? The similarities work to solve problems. We should look at each other how to do a successful initiatives and mirroring to each other how you do things successfully and what failures did you make, and then learning from that. So my idea is the collaborator. It's not like we're merging and then we're expanding corporations, but we do our own success by learning from each other, benchmarking to each other's. The closest thing that I could think of, my opinion, the closest thing that I could think of that we could do together is through bridges. I mean, like, you cannot push, even though there's BRICS, and Indonesia just announced that we're joining BRICS as well. But I think for me, it's a little to expect that there's actually a real, business to business cooperations between Latin America and Southeast Asia. But there needs to be a bridge. I know Middle East, UAE, Saudi Arabia, you mentioned, do a lot of investment in many, many countries around the globe. That should be the catalyst to the somewhat organic initiatives. But to push it to the extreme level that you expect that there will be, big corporations that work seamlessly between those regions, I think it's too much to expect, at least for the next 10 years. Of course, we're getting closer right now. We could do some more benchmarking, some more conversations. We're building, a closer ties over the next decade. But I think it will take time. Realistically, it will take time. And I think the best that we could do, like I mentioned, we're comparing notes to each other, make success in each of the regions. And there needs to be also a catalyst in the forms of UAE or Saudi Arabia to link us together. That's my opinion.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. No, look, I think we're. I'm going to push you all to give me a good conclusion for the, because our panel discussion, they wanted some conclusions at the end to say this is how we think it could move forward. Because look, I think any integration, 10% integration in Africa or a bit of a link with Indonesia, between Indonesia, and it's a rocket fuel for entrepreneurs. Because entrepreneurs just want market access and access to capital, and all of these links. So we don't doubt the connectivity. I think you have to run.
Yes, I will.
Soon.
I will run.
So let me
bit,
ask you to answer the question, but also give me one concrete thing I can give to our friend Dina to say
Yes.
this amazing panel has solved the
I
world.
was thinking. I
Yeah.
was thinking about
Found a
that.
way out.
Solve the world's problem, right? This is new globalization. So
Because
one each.
I will have to run because
you have to give us that.
I have a dinner with my wife at 8 p.m. and I don't want to move to any country as a refugee.
Yes,
Uh,
we
I
also
don't
want to
that.
open to
So,
hear from.
I also want to hear from everybody here,
Yeah.
but I think everybody's so
and
tired.
Tired.
It's been 2 days.
And yeah, please interrupt us if you think you can contribute to that.
Give me
But
your
one of the good things about our profession, being lawyers, that we are problem solvers, and therefore I like very much the American approach in regulating or deregulating, not as much for the European style that we learned in Egypt from the French, and we taught the entire Arab region later on how to do that. Where we think very theoretically, and we would like to resolve all the problems, so we sit on the same table with the COMESA, or with South Africa, or with Brazil, and we want to solve everything, from the passports to the trade controls, to the foreign direct investments, and therefore we don't reach anything. Whilst I think, and this is driving to the conclusion, I think, and we are in the house of a university and an amazing research place. Why don't we establish a kind of a very soft, large platform where we think about the problems and we do that like the Americans. We solve as we go. The Europeans taught us, and we are still doing this in our countries. We are over-regulating everything. And therefore, we are always behind because we don't leave the amazing, talented people, like all the young people that I have seen, who are making business without waiting for us to regulate for them. And this is, by the way, guys, you know, in the old days, we learned that the commercial law was the only law that was developing before the countries were putting an actual code for the commercial law. They called it at that time Lex Mercatoria. The traders and the commercialists didn't wait for us to regulate. They were doing business. They were delivering products. They were trusting any piece of paper that doesn't have any kind of legitimacy because they were heading to the right business. And we have seen, all of us, people of my age, the development of e-commerce. When we were like struggling how to book a ticket and so on and so forth. You do it like this today, maybe in your way to the airport and so on and so forth. So I think from a legal perspective, think of what are the main barriers between our talents and capital in our like South 85 part of the world, as Dr. Yassar was saying. First of all, maybe models. I love models than treaties, because treaties you will spend forever and you will not reach anything, and at the end it will be a very weak international document. Models for bilateral investment treaties. Models for confidentiality document. Even our young guys here can like go draw from that NDA that they want to do it with the developers or with the bankers or with the potential investors. Models for incorporation of LLC, models for double taxation treaties, models for IPR regulatory framework that any one of our amazing talents would like to make sure that they have to protect their ideas and their innovations and so on and so forth. And like being optimistic, like both of you and our amazing politician, is like we will see accumulative things like like the open resource web, the Wikipedia. It starts like that. Platform that is developed by the entrepreneurs, the smart people, the pro bono from the law firms, from the consultancy firms, and we will find after some time people are adapting, are amending, are using it because it makes sense for them to keep doing that. So I suggest whatever name of the platform, I'll leave it to you, doctor, because you are cleverer than us. But like RIIP, whatever, like PR, whatever, like platform for entrepreneurs across the
Across growth
Amira?
markets.
Sorry?
Across growth markets.
Cross markets, okay. And then we start planting it, and who knows, after some years, where are we going to be?
So, thank you very much. If you need to run, Doctor, you can be excused.
Okay.
I don't want to be the reason why you.
I will order the
Yeah,
order
no,
as
no.
we
You
speak,
said
and as soon as
if
the
you said
order
anything
is
apart
outside-
from your wife is waiting, I would have said stay with us. But that's that's too drastic. Look, what you're saying is basically let the business lead. Let the entrepreneurs lead in the sense that establish business links, give them enough space to establish business links, and we've seen that. We've seen a lot of people in our part of the world, at least, start lobbying back with the government to say we've done this deal with somebody there, but the rules are not helping, and it's a balance. I think it's not either or. I'm going to take all your suggestions. I don't think it's either or, but you're in a much bigger sort of industry, energy. And I would have thought, give us your silver bullet for integration. I would have thought in your space, this is the easiest conversation to be had because you're all about scale. It's not about is that where we start? Is that we start at the infrastructure level of energy and the whole connectivity and electricity and
Definitely energy and infrastructure because Africa represents the biggest opportunity. We've got the biggest resource, natural resource. We've got an endowment of energy transition minerals. But for me, it's, wherever society advances, you need to work strategically with policymakers, right? So we can't just do it on our own. We need, if other regions, for example, you could look at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement strategically as an opportunity to tap into $1.5 billion of talent, of also a market of consumers, a market that already has valued at about $3.5 trillion US, as a strategic thing to tap into so that you can draft policies and you can provide technical assistance, what's worked in your region to ensure that you unlock that. Then it helps entrepreneurs move and make a bigger impact. So for me, there is something to be done with, or something for all of us to do with how we see ourselves, how we interact, but strategically, what are we thinking? Where do we want to be by 2050? We will be the most impacted by climate change. So what are we going to do about it? And where are the rest of the multilateral development banks? We normally see people from IFC, Africa Financial Corporation, but where the Asian development banks or the Latin American development banks, you normally see the same people who are previously colonizers in the same regions, and that's where the biggest connections are. So for me, there's a mental shift that we still need to do, where we see ourselves more as equals in the regions that we're sitting in, and are able to work and coordinate to work in the long term to actually say, these are the things we could relax first, because this is what it means from a market opportunity and just strategically for all our people.
So basically we're back to the idea of mentally we have to shift. Can we have a quick round robin of solution? We really need, we've heard a fantastic conversation. I'll go from here, then here. Okay, we've got four silver bullets. Look, I think what you said, Gabriel, is fantastic, because I think there's a lot of healing that's required, right? We need to really adjust how we think about that stuff. Please, you have a mic now? Please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlene. I run the Ezra Charitable Trust. It's a private family foundation focused on economic development in Africa.
Where are you based?
I'm based in London.
Okay.
Yeah. I won't lie. I'm tired as a former entrepreneur, now philanthropist, of waiting for top-down change. Like this stuff with policy, I mean, we've been talking about AFTA for years. We've been talking about PAPS for years. So I'm a Pan-Africanist at heart, but I'm tired of waiting for African Union and multilaterals to get the politics out of the way, because we need the freedom of movement of goods, money, and people. But I don't think we're seeing that. So sorry, that's a little bit of soapboxing. But concretely and positively, I've been really excited. Our newest grantee is an organization called Institute for Transformative Technologies. And so what they're doing is using philanthropic money to do R&D in India of solar mini grids, organic waste treatment, medical oxygen hubs, and now green fertilizer without depending on natural gas. And then that IP is transferred pro bono to joint ventures and commercial ventures across Africa, so namely Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Kenya. So I'm really excited about seeing entrepreneurs collaborating South-South on solutions, and would love to hear if anyone else has seen organizations like ITT who are doing that, because I also want to see private philanthropy de-risking some of this stuff, because quite frankly, I don't see enough VCs with the patient capital to like build factories and processing plants and fertilizer chemical plants. So I think there's a role for private philanthropy too.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I think to your point, VCs don't have the patience and the interest, but what we need is just a bit of a push. Once we have 10 stories or 100 stories like that, then you can step back and let the market take over. So I agree with you. There needs to be an intervention, a fire starter, and philanthropic capital is the big deal. Please.
Hi, my name is Geetha Damrat. I'm the Chief Impact Investment Officer of the WHO Foundation. I started my career in an organization that doesn't exist anymore. The British Development Finance Institution, then called CDC, now called BII, had a massive portfolio. In 2001, the SME portfolio spun out and became a firm called Aureus Capital, which is a firm I joined. We were the largest investors in SMEs in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. We had 30 country offices across all these regions. Indonesia, our team were completely Indonesian. Peru, our team were completely Peruvian. In Zambia, our team were completely Zambian. And we were investing in SMEs. There was another firm that actually spun out from BII in 2003, which was called Actis. They were focusing on large cap, we focused on SMEs. Unfortunately, the private equity teams in those firms don't exist anymore, and there's a reason for that. But we went on to raise $1.3 billion, and we were having the conversations about the investments that we were investing in Indonesia, connecting them to the investments we were making in Mexico, because there were some similarities, similar drivers, right? What do we have in common? Well, we all have our visa stories of having to go and queue up in to get visas to certain countries. But these firms existed, and they existed as financial intermediaries, getting capital from asset allocators, and therefore then being able to write smaller tickets. And part of the issue here is, how do you finance, not just the flow here of the businesses, but the financing of these businesses without being stuck by having to have extreme regionalization of the kind of financing intermediaries, because that is also an inhibitor to both connectivity and scaling of these opportunities. So there's something there, because we were able to be set up because we were financed by a DFI that was doing something else for another 50 years before we were set up. So who would take that role on? And I hope someone does, because there was so much value. But we have some funds right now who are operating across two regions, right? So you have Leapfrog, for example, who are across Africa and Asia. On the other side, what I think about are companies like Indorama and companies like Toleram Group, right? Both sixth-generation Indian families in Indonesia, re-domiciled either to London or Singapore, and they are running big businesses between Southeast Asia, South Asia, Africa, and Europe, and doing extremely well. We have our stories, we have our examples. They're not very well documented unless you're in this space. and unless you're showing up to conferences like what used to be the Emerging Markets Private Equity Association Conference once a year in Washington, D.C., but is now the Global Private Equity Conference. So our communities are not connecting, and the VC community are the newest to the game. The PE industry, we have been there for a while, we know each other, we eat together, we pick up the phone and ask what's going on here. There's investments I've made in Indonesia, which have transferred onto Nigeria and transferred onto to Japan. But so much of this is through our individual networks and smaller groups. A lot is happening in London because it tends to be a bit of a crossroads for the space. But as you think about solutions, there is really this piece that keeps coming back to me in terms of how can we finance and get in place solutions. So if you're starting with this network, how do you lay a capital on there that can then be further deployed is the question that I have. And I want to just quickly end with something which made me laugh, and I'd like to share this with you. So as markets became more challenging in this country, a friend of mine who is an investment advisor sent me this. And he sent me the screenshot as a piece of advice from Goldman Sachs to his clients. Any macro fund that has traded EM in the past should find it relatively easy to use the same playbook for the US. Any instances of discretionary macro manager in emerging markets will have at least seen a few instances of this every year in their careers and should have managed US markets and global sell-off almost effortlessly, given their experience. And we all had a good laugh. Because all the trouble and wahala and nonsense we've dealt with in a lot of our markets suddenly made a lot more sense.
Well, I'm very happy to welcome the new member to Emerging Markets Group. It only makes us, makes us feel better about us. So if you want to jump in, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, thank you.
But thank you very much for those notes. I'm going to take the concrete point of we need better connections, at least with the private equity, and those meetings can't happen in Washington if we're serious about connecting Africa. We can't be discussing, I mean, I love MIT, but we can't be discussing connecting Africa to Brazil in MIT. It makes no sense to me, but...
So thank you very much, of course. My views of introduction, my name is Adel Bousili. I am based out of Egypt and I wear two hats that are very different. I'm an entrepreneur in Egypt. I'm running my own business, trying to scale and grow out of Egypt. And I'm a senior advisor to the center, to the Q Sharper Center, working on ecosystems across the globe. So they're very different hats. Now, a few things that were for me very interesting hearing it from the panel, and I'll use the terminology that you kindly use, the hard integration versus soft integration, right? So Dr. Abla started with something that was very clear in my mind. We have a railroad, two countries, it's very clear who the players are, it's very clear who's on top of that, right? And then I love the word of, for some people, Brazil is the world. For some people, Egypt is the world. And then everybody is looking sort of at their own. No, I mean, and the example, of course, goes on, right?
Yeah.
And then just building on that the knowledge and know-how of the commonalities, what needs to happen next, what are the problems that are solvable from one side to the other, the research it's there, right? It's not like if we go there, we're gonna just reinvent the wheel, right? So in my thought, it's more about intent and leadership. Who's just gonna take this torch and run? And the one thing that I don't really agree on is if we throw that on entrepreneurs, right? Although I also agree that the sort of top-down approach is gonna take us years and years, but then as an entrepreneur, again, wearing my other hat, if someone's telling me, instead of scaling your business, let's think of how to connect the globe together, I'll be like, give me some money to do it, right? So my only thought here is just also to get to the point so that I don't go on, I think it's somewhere in between. I don't think it's government down, top down, and it's not the entrepreneurs that's doing it. It's somewhere in the middle where entities, institutions, maybe like the center or a coalition of that would lead getting the right entrepreneurs together, channel with that, the right conversations with governments, policymakers, and so on, with definitely a bit of funding focused on that to choose the right people. But without that leadership, no entrepreneur is going to do it, no government is going to do it unless it's a hard one. That's my quick thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think that is absolutely on point. And we say in Arabic, entrepreneurs, they have enough problems to worry about. But you were very frustrated with the top-down approach, which will not work. And I'm with you. I've been in politics for about 35 years now, since I was 3. Look, it's not going to happen. We keep saying it, but it's not either not going to happen or not happening fast enough. But it can't be bottom up. So you're starting all to elude. And to your point, Geeta, you mentioned this whole idea of private equity. We need to get together more. There seems to be a third player that needs to bring people together. And this third player should change the narrative, share the stories, pretty much like the MIT, but we need 100 of this center, not just one. We need 100 of those, a network around the world. And then we're starting to come to a place where we think, okay, who should start this spark? Because once you start the spark and people see the money, I remember, Larry Fink came and said, about the climate. He said, once people start seeing the money, you can step back and don't worry about your cops. Just let people make money through something, and then it will happen. So I really like your point as well. Don't throw it all the way bottom up. It's somehow medium up.
Okay, thank you. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I'm in the telecoms business. I have a telecoms company. So for me, based in Nigeria, and as an entrepreneur, this is very interesting, and it's just making me think again. The question of demand and supply. English terms, who is demanding, who is supplying, in terms of the countries, and the negotiations in between the demand and the supply. Who are the people making the negotiations? And what is the motivation behind those negotiations? I think those are critical because it then helps to shape expectations. Because as an entrepreneur, I want to cut across Africa, for instance, but I have to go through the UK or through another European country before I can cut in through Africa, even as a telecom operator. So again, who is desiring to make that change happen? Is it the politicians, business owners, or even the venture capitalists? If they are, then are they together making those decisions by negotiating what is very sustainable? And it's kind of thought-provoking for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That goes back to your point, I think, which I wanted to mention. There's something about policymakers, and I think they need to educate. We always assume that policymakers know everything and have a great grand plan, and some of them are corrupt and not doing the right thing. And then when you sit and talk to them, you realize the amount of ignorance that's in there, and you realize that's how scary, especially today. I know people who are regulating AI who don't know how to use ChatGPT, right? And it's scary. Oh, yeah. So there's something about, because your industry, fintech or something else, is controlled by people who are putting, and then if you don't understand something, the easiest way is to ban it or to resist it, because you want to avoid mistakes. Public servants' job is to avoid mistakes, not to make things better, right? That's what they just want to. So I think your point is absolutely right. There's something about, I'm going to wrap up here, and I took some notes. I'm going to share with you some notes to see if you all agree.
No, but I'm
going to wrap up. It's going to give you your 60-second shot. Well, this is the wrap up. But I'm going to wrap up from the floor. I think the fundamental thing we're discussing is nobody's questioning the value of integration. Entrepreneurs will benefit a lot, but they don't want to lead the revolution. Politicians know it makes sense at a high level, but nobody seems to be interested enough to push it down. But I'm going to do a 60-second round robin to say the silver bullet each. The conditions have never been more right for this conversation. Absolutely, everybody's so scared now and worried and uncertain, and everything is all up in the air. So if you wanted to have a right conversation about changing things or reconnecting Africa or going further to Brazil, this is the right time. Now we have people who will listen. So what should they listen to? Same sequence, so I don't confuse myself. Yeah.
Sure.
It's like Mark Zuckerberg. He wears the same T-shirt every day to stop thinking about stuff, right? Please, same sequence.
Okay. And I'm going to be very specific. Okay. I have clear suggestions based on two things. One, businesses are going to make all the difference. The EU, when it got united, it was the pressure by the business community that pushed the EU to be the EU. Okay? So businesses are going to make difference. That's the first point. The second point, we need to focus on drivers of change. Lots of things need to be changed. We need to focus on the most important one. Having said this, I have 4 specific suggestions, and I think the center can do a lot of it. Okay? By the way, the entrepreneurs are not asked to carry the world on their heads. Okay, they are simply asked to do what they want, what they've always been doing, and doing it collectively and together and a lot in a mass thing will make the difference. The suggestions are as follows. One, we need to adjust the taxonomy, and we were talking about this before we entered. When you have zillion definitions for the same things, you cannot even compare, you cannot talk, okay? So the definition of what is SME, what is the meaning of such digital system, etc., it needs to be unified, and the discussion of such taxonomy can be done by the center. Okay, that's number one. The second thing is a comparison of the ecosystems. It's one thing to say, let us unify the ecosystems, okay, and it's another to actually see what is the ecosystem in Nigeria, describe it. What is the ecosystem in Brazil? What is the ecosystem in Egypt? Compare, okay, and even come up with the best in all of them to have a proper ecosystem and suggest it. And this would be written and documented in a white paper. The third one, okay, is to connect the center with think tanks in all those countries so that you have many players. The last is a bit of the romantic ideas of yours. When I entered the US with the passport, they said they have 3 lines. You're either from the US, and they keep repeating the message, like with cows, herds of cows. Either you are a US citizen, or you're a global, you have a global passport, or you are others. Of course, I was in the others, but I never understood the global passport. If someone who was born on the plane or something, so he has the nationality of the entire world. But let us talk about having a passport, an entrepreneurial passport, so the entrepreneurs, their success, the proof of their business, would be their entry point anywhere in the world, anywhere in those continents. So let's have an entrepreneurial global passport.
Thank you, Dr. I think this is something MIT can work on. Dina just popped her head through the door, and she said to me, which I think roughly means we'll finish, and she wants us in there. So
I'll be
30 seconds, 30 seconds.
Okay, so I have 4 points. The first one is maybe we should invest in cities to cities agreement, because we have concrete problems to solve, and then we have entrepreneurs that live in the cities, and how we connect them, and we can trust the politicians that are in the cities. The second one is, when we think about politicians, when we think about entrepreneurs, if I ask you to close your eyes, who are you going to see? Probably you're going to see a man. Yes. And I think women are a solution also. So if we invest in women and we trust in women, I know we can build change, because if you see the data, and I don't have it here, I'm ashamed of not having it, but if you see the data, when women are running countries, when women are running companies, they go better. They go more diverse, they go invest in inequality, they collaborate. So I think here's another answer. And then the third one, it's not a suggestion, but it's something that it got to me, because you said, I trust in the new generation, they will find a solution. And I don't think that's fair with them, because we put ourselves here, and I think we should be responsible for also to find a way out. So just to point that. And then there's this African saying, again, in Brazil it's just Africa, right? You guys can tell me if you know the country, which is Ubuntu.
South Africa.
South Africa. I am because we are, right? And I think this idea can make us find a new way out.
Thank you. I thought we were going to get through the whole day, the whole session without mentioning gender, but you have to slip it in there. But at least we didn't mention Trump.
So my lesson learned for today: in the Growth Market Forum, you don't make comment on football. Sorry. But I think, again, I made my point. There's a lot of similarities, and forums like this, actually, we could share, success stories, what things are workable to solve problems in the growth market. Also, very important to learn about failures as well, what failures that people make, and we make success, in our own each regions. That's my recommendations. I think we don't push companies to expand where there's actually no resources to actually expand. I think that will just like pushing for failures, in my opinion. It takes a lot to do it. Only the ones that have the capabilities, the resources to do it, I think they will be organically doing the expansions. I will suggest also another suggestions is that for countries that have upper side in the capitalizations from Middle East, from Asia, to actually to push for some some collaborations as a middleman, because I don't think it could actually happen organically between countries where it has a geographical distances.
Thank you.
I'll keep mine short. My wish has been for us to set up a sort of World Economic Forum for growth markets. We need to share successful stories, as we heard with some of the PE funds that are operating in Asia and Africa. We definitely need politicians and policymakers in the room, and we need to pull in capital and leverage whatever assets that we have. We need to do this regularly so that also we could hold ourselves accountable and see if we're moving forward, and if we start this year, where are we in 5 or 10 years?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Look, I think I'm going to take away one point I'm going to tell to Dina is that despite everything we just talked about, it's all about software. We need a place where these stories get shared, where we meet, politicians meet. I like your idea of a World Economic Forum for emerging markets. So I think my friend Sheen Mulavi in Johns Hopkins, he says we need a place where people who are sitting on stage discussing the future of the world are sort of, yellow and brown, and because he said every time I go to Davos, they're discussing Africa, but the colors on the stage are not the same. It's not about color here, it's about inclusivity, but it's about putting together this narrative. It's all about narrative. I think the opportunity has been proven. Everybody seems to be excited about it. This could go on for many, many hours, but Dina will kill us if we don't go back to the room, because they want us in the closing ceremony, I think, Rania now.
Yes.
And I'm going to take 3 points out of this. One of them is we need 100 of this center. We need to multiply the center by 100 times, so these conversations can continue. Thank you so much. It's really a fantastic conversation.